Morning, lovely people. It's Vlogmas day 4 and I am not working until 5:30 this afternoon, so I have time to sew today. I'm very excited. It's a great overcast today, nothing exciting happening with the weather at this point, and so I thought I would put my buffalo plaid onesie on after my shower, save the work clothes till later so they don't get threads all over them. Plus, of course, the onesie is so much more comfortable. And I'm just clearing the decks a little bit. I moved my serger out of the way, so I've just got room for my regular sewing machine, and I'm putting my paper crafting things away. And I'm going to get going on this Christmas wall quilt. My first job is to cut my 2.5-inch squares out of this red fabric that I bought last week. I have these already cut, these 6.5-inch squares in a green dot, a red dot, red snowflake, green snowflake, very Christmas print, wiener dog print, and finally, if I can get to it, holly. The plan is to make snowball blocks, so there's going to be red triangular corners on each of these, and then I'm going to sew them all together. This should not take long. Famous last words. I've got a new blade in my rotary cutter. It might still sound rough though, because it's a cheap one. Do not be alarmed. Straighten up this end. And no, I haven't washed it. I haven't even ironed it, because this is stitches and slapdashery, and we revel in our slapdashery here. All right, 2.5-inch strips. Now, I can't remember what I calculated and how many I needed. So out of a 44-inch wide fabric, 2.5, 5, 10, 15, 20. I think I can get 16 2.5-inch squares out of one of these, so let's try for that. That would do 4 blocks, and I have 42. So I'll probably just do 4 strips to start with, because I know I can subcut through 4 strips or 8 layers. Always take the salvages off, and then we will do 2.5-inch cuts across. Of course, the more layers you do, the slightly less accurate it gets. I think what I'm going to do once I've done these is I'll pair them up with their block that they're going to be attached to. We'll see how far it goes. Let's see if these last little scraps are 2.5 inches wide. They're probably a bit small. Nope. Okay. As expected, that made enough corner squares for 16 blocks. I'm going to do another 4 strips now. I think this last set only needs to be 3 strips, and then it should give me plenty of squares for my last blocks. Now, in case you're worried about my red fabric bleeding in the wash, I have no intention of washing this quilt. It's going to be hanging on my wall. So I'm not concerned about pre-washing the fabric. And I don't think I'm going to need it all, but let's just do a bit at a time to be on the safe side. That candle I lit this morning was very smelly. It's not that it was a nasty smell, it was just strong. This is why I rarely burn candles. And if I do, it's normally a soy candle with no scent, because that one this morning is called Hippie Vibes, and I think it's called that because it makes you want to be high. No, not really high, just headachy. It definitely made me feel a little headachy, and I was only burning it for a few minutes. But I thought it would make a pretty start to the day. Nearly there. There's my stack of fabrics all ready to go. I'm getting there. I changed my walking foot out for just the regular foot. And then when I have put the triangles on the corners of the snowball block, and when it comes to piecing the blocks together, I'm going to use my 1/4 inch foot. I'm pretty good at eyeballing 1/4 inch, but this one has a guide on the side so that you actually end up with an accurate seam. I dug out this old thing, which I've had for donkey's years. It's a silver marking pencil, hoping this is going to work well for drawing the diagonal lines on my red squares before I sew them. I could use anything really, because no one's going to see those lines when the sewing is finished. I have my ruler handy. So these little squares here, these little scraps rather, I'm going to be using them as thread bunnies. Kate at the Last Homely House calls them thread bunnies. And whatever you call them, they're really handy because you can put them under the foot of your machine, sew a few stitches across, and then you can start sewing your block. And that saves a bunch of thread nests or pulling on the edge of the fabric when it starts to sew. So that's handy. And as you can see, this is amazingly clear right now, so I have lots of room to work. Still a big pile of mess over in that corner over there, but at some point I should probably go through that and see what the heck is in there and why I'm keeping it there. Probably a lot of it is scrap paper. All right, so another slurp of tea. And I'll get to marking. So I don't know if you know what a snowball block is, but probably the easier way is to do it like this with the squares, because if you cut triangles and then try and sew them on, you're going to be dealing with a bias edge here. Whereas if you've got your square here and then you just sew and cut, sew, flip and cut, or sew, cut and flip, then in theory it's more accurate, as long as your sewing is accurate, of course. So what you do is just mark across. You could probably eyeball the diagonal line as well. Now, is this going to show up enough? I can barely see that. I see it under the light of my sewing machine? Hardly. I may have to use a different pen or pencil. My friend, when my friends came for that sewing day a couple of weeks ago, one of them had a really good chalk pencil, which I have in my Amazon cart now, which is really good because it comes with different coloured chalks in a sort of pen case. You can just put in the colour you need depending on the colour of your fabric. Let's see if my green friction pen works. Some of my friction pens have dried up. They tend to dry up quite quickly when you're not looking. Oh, well, that's all right. Here's my neat little stack of squares ready to sew. I don't know if you can see the friction pen lines on each of these pieces. I think that was like 168 pieces of red fabric. Felt like it took forever. So the next step is to position them on the corners and sew. Now this could be tricky because it's going to fall off, isn't it? Okay, let's think about this. All right, I'm going to have to pay attention and make sure that I sew them the correct way. So in fact, for maximum efficiency, what I should do, I didn't really need to have my squares matched up with my big squares already, because the efficient way of doing this is just going to be to chain piece one red square onto each background block all the way along in one fell swoop. So these are actually going to come off. Hello. I know this will amuse you. This is what happens when you're not paying attention. I sewed a corner on, but there was a piece of fabric stuck to the back. So I'm going to have to unpick that one. Let's find the reverse sewing tool, shall we? Which is always to hand. There we go. What a silly bugger. This is a situation where I'm really glad I lengthened my stitch to 2.4 and I haven't got stitches that are too small and tight for unpicking. And so we continue. Well, that seemed to take forever, and that was just one square on each corner, on each block. I think it's 42 squares, but it felt like 142. I'm so impatient. When I start something, I just want it to be finished sometimes. I really should learn to appreciate the process more. It doesn't all have to get done in one day, does it? Somehow with quilting and sewing on the machine, you feel like you should be able to get it done in a day, but that's just silly. Just going to snip them all apart so I can then go and do another row of stitching. I am trying to decide right now whether to do another square on each square or just go and get some lunch. I think it might be lunchtime. What I've seen with some of these snowball tutorials is that when people flip this over, they'll trim away both layers underneath and then iron it over. And I'm thinking that maybe that might not be the best way for me to do it, because these are probably not perfectly sewn on the line, some of them. And probably what would be the best thing is to trim just the underneath red layer right there and leave the backing so that I know exactly where the edge of the square is supposed to be, and then the top red layer. And I think that would be a good idea. Another reason why I think it's a good thing is that this fabric is a little heavy for a quilt cotton, almost a duck. And this is just a regular quilt cotton weight. So I think I may well end up trimming back just this middle piece and leaving the backing, and then it hopefully will be more stable and more close to its original shape and size, shall we say. So yeah, that'll be a little fiddly. It'll be quicker just to slice both layers off with a rotary cutter, but no, I think I'm going to do it my way. And I'm sure I've seen that done that way before, to maintain the shape and edge of the original square. That's it so far. Time to take a break. While I had my lunch, I edited what I have so far, which was a really sensible decision, because if I'm home really, really late tonight, I don't want to be editing a whole video because it'll push my bedtime super late. So I put Kate's daily Patreon video on just now, and that has made the second corner go really fast. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch you off, and I'm going to put another video on, maybe some Ali at This Little Wonderful Life or something, and listen to her chat while I get some more squares sorted. I have set my alarm for 2 p.m. because I will need to prep some dinner and get myself dressed for work at some point. And then if I stop sewing at 2 and then get myself sorted with all the other stuff I have to do, and if I have extra time after that, which I should do, then I can do a few more stitches on the crochet or the cross stitch while I'm waiting for 4:45, which is be my leaving time. See you in a bit. Best thing about listening to my favourite podcasters talk is that it makes the sewing go by so much faster. And now I have the incredibly satisfying stage, and I realise you can't see what I'm doing, incredibly satisfying part of ironing my triangles to the outside corners. Oh, and now we can see what they're going to look like properly. Oh, they look so pretty. I'm going to do the ironing first, and that will get rid of my friction pen lines because the heat makes them disappear. And then I will call it quits for now and go and do my chores. And later I'll do my corner trimming, that middle layer of corner that needs to come out. I'll do that later on. But I feel like I've made really good progress today. So pretty. Now when these blocks go together, they make a secondary pattern with the red corners. They're going to make a diamond shape where the corners all join to each other. I'm thinking it needs something maybe like a little bell or a little charm in the middle of each of these red squares or diamonds as embellishment. But that's a decision for another day because I've got a ways to go before I get to that point. Oh, very lovely. I've got my batting on my wall here, so once I've trimmed my corners I'll be able to put my squares up on the wall, my design wall, and figure out what arrangement I'm going to use. I don't know whether I'm going to go for a predictable arrangement of my 7 different fabrics, or is it 6 different fabrics? It's either 7 fabrics, 6 squares of each, or the other way around, and I can't remember because I cut them out a while back. There's not going to be any sashing, so there'll be no complicated bits there. I just watched Ali of, now let's see, I watched her Little Drops of Wonderful Vlogmas for today, and I also watched her, no, I got that wrong. I watched her This Little Wonderful Life, ouch, burnt myself, Vlogmas for today, so that was fun. And then I watched her Little Drops of Wonderful video on great crochet shawls to make with Advent minis. I don't do Advent minis as a rule. I did make myself one a couple of years back, which was fun. And I even sewed all the little cloth bags and put a little ball of yarn and some beads and things into all the bags. But we've all got scraps of yarn, right? Haha, haven't we all? So whether you've just got a whole bunch of random skeins of yarn or a fancy curated set from some Advent indie dyer, Ali was showing off 10 lovely crochet shawls that you could use your yarn with. Very inspiring. There's just too many ideas out there to make them all. So hard to decide what to make next sometimes. I do love how these look. There's the holly one, and then the one with the words on, and of course the wiener dog. So cute. And I made it by my 2 p.m. deadline. A lovely break in the cloud today. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. It's rather nice to see the sun before it gets dark. It's nearly 4 o'clock. I made a speedy lasagna, otherwise known as slapdash lasagna, because it's like whiz up the tomato sauce in the Vitamix and whiz up the tofu ricotta layer in the food processor, cook the lasagna, throw it all in a dish, stick some cheese on top, throw it in the oven. No fuss, no muss. So I already ate some because it's easier to eat that now than take it to work with me. So I'm just taking some fruit with me for my snack later when I have my 30-minute break, and a flask of hot chocolate. This afternoon, I managed to get more achieved on the hood in a Snood. I finished the first short row section and I've done a straight round. I need to do one more round straight, and then I think there's another short row section. My stitch count was a smidgen off. When I originally finished after the short rows, I was 2 stitches off. I managed to regain a stitch. So I think instead of 80, I now have 79. The colours in this are lovely. It's hard to tell in artificial light because it's getting dark already outside, so I had to put a light on. But there's a little bit of blue and purple in the strands as well, which is nice. One downside is that this is going to be the very front of the neck, and that's where you do your join and turn. So it looks a little messy with the colour changing, but probably it'll crumple down in front of the neck and not really show too much. So I'm really pleased with the sewing progress I made today and the crochet progress. And I'm going to finish the vlog here for the day so that I can attempt to get it uploaded before I leave for work, because I will be home pretty late tonight and I don't want to have to do any faffing about when I get home at, I don't know what it'll be, 10:45 maybe. So I hope you've enjoyed watching. Thank you for being here and following along and leaving your lovely comments. And I'll see you again tomorrow.